Hello, Create Schools. Today I want to talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis. It is the second case study in Chapter 5 under the Containment Policy, and this video is going to talk about the background, so the Cuban Revolution and the Bay of Pigs. Go ahead and pause here and write this down if you haven't already written it down, and I'll move on to the next slide. Okay. So again, this is from about the containment policy. So I will again refer you to, if you don't know what the containment policy is, please look at my video, Containment Policy Explained. You'll see it both in Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 playlist. Okay, so Cuba. Cuba is right there just south of Florida. So a lot of Americans loved Cuba, and a lot of rich Americans had houses there, investments there. They had a lot of wonderful things there. It was the place to go for vacation. Okay, and General Batista, he was the guy in charge. He was the president or dictator, and he really loved the Americans, but he was very corrupt. He took bribes, he didn't care about his people, basically he catered to the Americans, and so for the Americans it was the high life. It's the loveliest land that human eyes have ever seen. But for the Cubans it was really bad. They were oppressed, they didn't have a lot, and so a man named Fidel Castro decided that he was going to get a whole bunch of people together and overthrow the Batista government. Go ahead and pause the video here and take these notes down, and then I'll tell you a little bit about Fidel Castro. So here is a lovely picture of Fidel Castro right here on the upper left picture. This says Libertad or Muerte, so liberty or death. So here is Fidel Castro screaming that, planes bombing. Here is his band of people. So the Cuban Revolution happened in 1959, and a lot of people joined him, and they killed a lot of rich people, a lot of landowners, Batista and a whole bunch of people. The normal Cuban majority of people loved him. Basically, he was saying, let's work together, let's rise up, let's take our land back for ourselves. And so when they did that, they kicked out all of the American companies and industries, and all the Americans fled to America. They could not live there anymore. And all of the rich Cubans also fled to the United States. And those rich Cubans will become very important shortly. So basically, any Batista supporter is gone. And it was a bunch of, the normal peasants, the normal people of Cuba who lived there, and Castro, who was in charge of them. So go ahead and pause the video here, and I'll move on to the next one. So of course, what does the U.S. think about this? Everything was taken away from them. So the U.S. imported a lot of sugar also from Cuba, and actually they had a monopoly, so all the sugar in Cuba went to America. And so the U.S. stopped importing the sugar. And basically Cuba said, okay, well, we need some help. So Khrushchev is right there from the USSR saying, okay, I'll work with you, and gives Cuban over $100 million in economic aid. And that was a lot of money there. And they started trading sugar with each other. And basically that ended all diplomatic relations between the USA and Cuba in January of 1961. So John F. Kennedy becomes president, and he said, this is crazy. This is the Soviets and the American sphere of influence, so in the West, and there's no way we can have this communism here. And so we've got some video or some political cartoons here. This is a Russian political cartoon, and what he has right here says, I forbid you to make friends with the Soviet Union. And here we've got America, who's looking evil, and their tanks. And here's Castro looking nice and strong and lovely. And so this is what is showed in the Soviet papers. And here we have Cuba Libre for free Cuba. So here we've got Castro trying to release all of the people and become free again. from under the rule of Batista. And remember, Batista was a really horrible guy, but he was capitalist and he did support the Americans, so the Americans really liked him. But of course the Cubans liked Castro because he wanted them to be free and work hard. Also, with this diplomatic relations between the USA and Cuba, when I first started teaching at Create Schools, there was still no relationship between Cuba and US, and people from the United States were not actually ever allowed to go to Cuba. So for me, I've grown up thinking that no one can go to Cuba. So I moved here to Germany, and it's like, oh, you mean Germans can go to Cuba? How odd. So it was really shocked me because I basically thought no one went to Cuba. There's my little American ideas. But anyway, so Castro has also just died recently. I believe it was 2016, and his brother Raul took over, also an old person. And so right now Cuba is still communist, but the United States does have diplomatic relationships with them in the last few years. Go ahead and pause here and take these notes. Okay, so then Kennedy has this idea of the Bay of Pigs. And so let me just show you this map, because this map is very important to get this in your head. So here's Cuba, right here, and it is right next to Miami. If you're a really, really, really good swimmer, I think it's so close that you could almost swim, but no, probably not. That's 500 miles, 500 miles. But you could definitely get in a rickety raft and row between the two. Take you a long time, but you could do it. So here's the United States. This is why America is so worried. Here are some missiles, and I believe I'll go over in this later in the next slide, but they're very close. And so if the Soviets have control of this area, it's like right in our own backyard, and that's a little scary. So what Kennedy decided to do is they were going to encourage all the anti-Castro Cuban exiles who lived in America to try to take back Cuba. So we had 1,400 people basically volunteer, and they got trained here in Nicaragua and the Virgin Islands. Let's see, Puerto Rico right here, U.S. Virgin Islands right here. And so we supplied all these people with stuff and ability in order to get to Cuba, and they go ahead and invade them here in the Bay of Pigs. And when they get there, when they land, 20,000 Cubans were waiting for them. So we had 1,400 people, Cuban exiles, invading, and 20,000 Cubans were waiting. So huge embarrassment. Basically, someone must have leaked that this was going to happen, and the Cubans were ready for them. A lot of people were killed, and the ones who were not killed were marched as prisoners to Havana, to the capital, and showcased how horrible that the Americans were. So we have our picture of this is Kennedy and the cigar blowing up in his face. As you may or may not know, Cuba is famous for their Cuban cigars. So it has blown up in his face, the Bay of Pigs invasion. It shows Kennedy is very weak, and it shows Castro is very strong. So huge, 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 huge embarrassment for the Americans. Go ahead and pause the video here and take these notes down for the Bay of Pigs. So the result of the Bay of Pigs invasion. So Cuba was declared definitely a communist nation by Castro in December 1961. Castro asked Khrushchev to provide arms for Cuba so he could protect himself against those horrible U.S. people. And Khrushchev decided that he was going to put missiles into Cuba in order to help protect Cuba against America. And so here we've got our little wall with the United States here. Hints on pruning. That said, pruning is cutting trees and cutting things in order to make them grow better. And here we've got Russia. So here we've got Cuba in America's backyard, but then we have Japan and Turkey and West Germany and Russia's backyard. So this is kind of showing the irony that America is so mad that Cuba is right there, but yet America has so much influence over in Europe right next to Russia. Okay, so pause here and take these notes. Actually, you can pause me permanently because this is the last slide in this, and then we will move on next to the Cuban Missile Crisis.